After recently fishing Snell's Lake, I decided to give Perseys a go to try and catch some of the beautiful fish that swim within it. I've fished Perseys previously a couple of years ago but didn't have much luck, although I did fish it during the winter months when most lakes are generally tough to fish. Perseys was traditionally the easier of the two lakes, however last winter the lake had been drained down and the stock reduced to try and grow on the fish to bigger weights. Also, Perseys are full of weed and finding spots to present a bait can be difficult. This combined means Perseys is definitely no pushover, but the rewards are there to be had if you can find the fish.
Good evening, and you join me at a very wet Perseys pool on the Digger Lakes complex. Don't know if you can see just over my shoulder, but it's absolutely hammering it down. I've got 24 hours on the bank. All 3 rods are out on their spots and there's definitely fish in the area. I've seen one crash and there's been 3 or 4 sets of bubbles as well, so it's looking good for a bite.
Before setting up, I took a walk around the lake to find where the fish were holding up. It didn't take long to spot feeding activity, and that's when I grabbed the kit from the car. I found nice clear spots for all 3 of my rods and then sat back to enjoy a very damp evening. Joe was joining me on this particular session and had chosen to swim next to me towards the shallower water. It continued to rain all evening, and just as it was getting dark, my right hand rod ripped off and I was attached to my first Perseys carp.
Well, there we go, first fish of the trip, just under 16 pounds, and what a chunky common carp that is. Beautiful.
After slipping back the beautiful common, I got the rod back on the spot and settled down for the night ahead. Just before first light, my right hand rod was away again, and on the end was an absolute cracker.
Well, there we go, a fish just before first light, and they don't come any more pretty than that. Look at the scales down the lateral line there, absolutely gorgeous. What a result.
After slipping that beautiful linear back into the depths, I cast the rod back out, put a sprinkling of boilies and sweet corn around the spot and retreated back into the sleeping bag.
Good morning, and it is the first break in the rain we have had since yesterday afternoon when we arrived, and the sun has just about made an appearance, but 2 fish during the night, one just as it got dark and then again one just before first light. What a mega result that is. And that all came on the Pacific tuna wafter. Now I've done a bit of research on Perseys pool, and usually bright baits work or seem to do the majority of the bites, but they seem to be on the feed. There was a few bubbles in the swim and a few fish crashes, so they did appear to be on the feed, which is why I put out a wafter, and I've got one also the match a hatch pop up, and I've put a yellow NS1 pop up towards the island, but it's looking good for the bite. I'm going to get the rods back out on the spots, put a bit more bait out, and hopefully we can get ourselves another one.
Putting a bit more bait in the area certainly got the fish back on the feed. Yet again, my right hand rod, which was underarm flicked to a gravel spot, burst into life with another hard fighting fish on the end. The carp in this lake certainly give a good account for themselves, and with the abundance of weed present in the lake can make for a pretty hairy fight getting them in.
Well, there we go. What about that for another beautiful fish? Bang on 18 pounds. In just about 5 minutes ago I repositioned this right hand rod with a Pacific tuna wafter, and what a result. Beautiful. And there she is, the other side. Cracking result. That's 3 fish now fall into my right hand rod on the Pacific tuna wafter, so I think I'm going to make a change and put all 3 rods on the exact same approach. Make sure the spots out there are clear, put a bit of bait out, some boilies, some halibut pellets, and also a bit of sweet corn as well. That's what's been doing the bite on that right hand rod, and see if we can winkle ourselves out another one.
The weather remained spot on for the rest of the morning and going into the afternoon. It was obvious the fish were enjoying the lower pressure. There were constant signs of fish feeding, with bubbles and tail patterns breaking the surface regularly. I knew there was a chance of another bite before the end of the session, and the weather turned again. I was just reeling in my right hand rod to put a fresh bait on and recast when my left hand rod shot off out of the blue. This rod had been positioned out towards mid-water and remained motionless up until this point of the session. This fish felt bigger from the start and was using its weight to keep low in the water. I managed to guide it away from the weed beds to ensure I had the best chance of landing this fish.
Well, there we go. What about that? 22 pounds 4 ounces of mirror carp. What a cracker. Well, 4 fish in that low 20 being the icing on the cake, and that making a change for all 3 rods to the wafters, the one that I know that's doing the bites. In that brought a change. That was my left hand rod that actually burst into life just as I was repositioning one of the upper rods, and what a result. Can't be more chuffed than that.
After slipping back the 20 pounder and getting the rods back out, the rain started to move back in, and during the next dry spell I packed up the kit. A week later I was back trying to catch another Perseys carp.
When I arrived to the lake, I did a quick lap to see if I could spot any activity in likely looking spots, and it was quite evident where the fish were feeding really. There was one particular swim 3, where there were a few bubbles, probably about 5 to 10 yards out. So I quickly ran back to the car, grabbed the barrow, loaded up the barrow, got it round to the swim, and I set up 2 rods on the Pacific tuna wafters, and I've just flicked them out to where I was seeing the bubbles, and putting a handful of freebies around as well, with sweet corn pellets and a few crushed up boilies, and I'm hoping that might result in a quick bite. It's looking good. There's still a few in the area. I think the initial pressure just pushed them away a bit, but there's definitely a few starting to return and a few bubbles coming out, so conditions are bang on.
I had just finished setting up the brolly and sat down to watch the water when my left hand rod screamed off. The fish came straight up to the surface and rolled, and I managed to catch a quick glimpse of it, and I knew I'd hooked one of the absolute gems of this lake. The fish put up a great fight, kiting me right across to my right hand margin where there were a few overhanging trees, but I managed to stop it just at the last minute, and it gave a few more runs under the rod tip before I managed to slip it into the net.
Well, how about that? A beautiful Perseys fish. What a scale pattern on that. Come about 30 minutes after we've just put the rods out on the margin spots where I saw those bubblers, and away it went. Absolute ripper, gave me a hell of a scrap. What a fish that is. Definitely a character fish. It's missing an eye on this side, but doesn't take away any of the beauty from that side. Get in. Well, it just goes to show, right place, the right time, and it doesn't take long to get a bite at all. 18-pound 4-ounce mirror, real pretty fish, character fish as well. It's missing an eye, but it doesn't take anything away from how beautiful that scale pattern was along its flank. Beautiful fish. Both rods back out in the spots, both on Pacific tuna wafters. That's what's doing the bites. Hopefully we can get ourselves another one. It's looking good. The fish are just pushed off just after that bite. You can see a few bubbles out towards the islands, but there's no doubt they'll be coming back in and feeding on that nice clean spot out there. On a lake that's as weedy as this one, it's important to try and find a couple of clear spots that you can be confident that your bait and your rig is fishing effectively. I've been lucky enough that on my right hand rod I found a nice gravel spot, only 4 wraps out, and on my left hand rod I'm fishing over a clay spot with a firmer bottom and clear of any debris, which is absolutely perfect. But there are a few swims on here that you may struggle to find some clear spots, which is when I would go for a low line pop up that would just sit on top of that debris, and that way you know that your hook isn't into any weed and you're fishing as effectively as possible. Another important factor when fishing weedy lakes is the line lay. You don't want your line tight to your bait, to your lead, going up over some weeds and then slack towards your rod tip. You want to make sure that when you cast it down, you sink the line, but also if you keep the rod tip high, if you're fishing over a weed bed, keep your rod tip high and slacken off. Just give it a bit of slack as it approaches that weed bed and then back to your tip. I always tend to fish semi-slack line unless I need to fish a tight line, say fishing up to an island or something like that. So that's another factor to keep in your mind when you're fishing weedy lakes. So my 2 top tips: try and find clear spots, and also think about your line lay when you're fishing. I'm absolutely gutted. I've just lost one on the left hand rod. It's just taken me into the weed, locked up solid. I'm just trying to ease it out with gentle pressure. It couldn't feel the fish anymore. After probably about 5 minutes of being in the weed, couldn't feel it anymore, and it's just obviously discharged the hook into the weed. Got my rig back. I've just tied up a new one. Just the hook went a little bit blunt, obviously putting it into the weed. I just wanted to retie a new one, give me a bit more confidence. But on a positive note, that's both spots producing a bite so far today.
After losing that fish, the rest of the afternoon passed without any further sign of a fish in the area.
Well, it's just coming into the evening now and the sun's finally decided to make an appearance. It's been a good couple of hours since I lost that fish on the left hand rod out in mid-water, but both rods are back out on the spots for the evening, and I've put a bit more bait in, a scattering of Pacific tuna boilies, a scattering of squid pellets, and also some sweet corn around the spots as well. And that seems to be doing the business on this lake. It's certainly the winning combo at the moment. I'm going to have myself some dinner and then I think I'll settle in for the night.
It was certainly a beautiful evening to be out on the bank and enjoying the views the lake had to offer. As it got dark, I climbed into the sleeping bag for the night, hoping to be awoken by one of the alarms during the night.
Well, a rather uneventful night. Not even a touch on either of the two rods, and about 5 o'clock this morning it started to absolutely hammer it down. I don't know if you can tell just over my shoulder there. You can probably hear it on the microphone. It is absolutely bucketing down. Not much sign of fish activity in the area. I think they've definitely pushed off of this particular swim at the moment. I did see a few bubbles just before it got dark, so I was hopeful that there was going to be a bite. There's definitely a few fish probably still in the area, so it's definitely looking good. We might get another bite, but for now I think it's time to have some breakfast.
Unfortunately, the rest of the morning passed without any further action, but I was more than happy with the 2 successful trips I had visiting Perseys. If you have enjoyed the video, please drop it a like and subscribe if you're new. It is very much appreciated. And until the next time, I'll catch you later.